I locked my gay books in a safe, but Mom's message left me completely stunned the second I stepped through the front door of my childhood home in suburban Illinois. There it sat on the living room carpet, the old metal box I had hidden in the basement for years, its door hanging open like a broken promise, and right on top of my scattered journals lay a single folded note in Mom's neat handwriting. The summer heat pressed against the windows, but I felt ice in my veins as I dropped my duffel bag and picked up the paper. Isaiah, honey, I came by to water the plants while you were at work. I wasn't snooping, but the safe wasn't latched right. These books and letters, they don't change how much I love you. Ryan sounds wonderful from what I read. When you're ready, I'm here. Dad's at the shop until 6. Come find me. My hands shook so hard the words blurred. Ryan. She knew his name. She had read the private letters I wrote to him on lonely nights when the fear of being found out kept me awake in our Chicago apartment. I had driven 2 hours from the city thinking it was just another weekend visit. But now everything I had buried since college was spilling across the floor like evidence at a trial. I sank onto the couch, heart hammering. The books, The Velvet Rage, Giovanni's Room, a worn copy of Call Me by Your Name, stared back at me. Their spines cracked from years of secret reading. I had bought them one by one during lunch breaks, paid cash, and smuggled them home like contraband. Ryan had teased me gently about it once, saying I treated my own story like a crime scene. Ryan. God. How was I going to tell him Mom knew? We had been together for 2 years, meeting at a quiet university mixer in downtown Chicago where I had shown up pretending to be straight curious. He was 26 then, confident in his own skin, working as a graphic designer with a laugh that made the room feel lighter. I was the cautious one, the guy who still introduced him as my roommate to anyone who asked. Memories rushed in as I stared at the safe. The night we first kissed on the rooftop of his building overlooking the river, city lights twinkling like distant stars. The way he held my hand under the table at that little Italian place on Clark Street, thumb tracing circles on my palm while we talked about everything except the future. I had told him I wasn't ready for family, that my dad's Sunday sermons and Mom's church group made it impossible. Ryan had nodded, patient as always, but I saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes every time I changed the subject. Now Mom had read the letters where I poured out how much I loved him, how scared I was to lose the only family I had ever known. I stood up slowly, gathering the books and slipping them back inside. The safe clicked shut with a finality that felt hollow. Upstairs in my old bedroom, the posters of baseball players I had never cared about still hung crooked on the walls. I had played the part so well, star athlete in high school, polite son at every holiday dinner. But inside I had been drowning. College had been my escape, the first time I breathed without looking over my shoulder. Meeting Ryan felt like coming up for air after years underwater. He introduced me to his friends, took me to Pride quietly at first, just the two of us watching the parade from the sidewalk because I wasn't ready to march. He never pushed, but I knew the waiting weighed on him. Downstairs the clock ticked toward 5. Dad would be home soon, smelling of motor oil from the auto shop he owned. Mom would be in the kitchen, probably pretending nothing had happened until I brought it up. I pulled out my phone and stared at Ryan's last text. Drive safe, babe. Can't wait for you to get back tonight. I typed nothing. How could I explain this over a screen? The note burned in my pocket like a live coal. Mom's words were kind, but they opened a door I had nailed shut. What if Dad found out? What if the neighbors started whispering at church? The fear coiled tight in my chest, but underneath it, something else stirred. A tiny spark of relief I was terrified to name. I walked into the kitchen and found Mom at the counter chopping vegetables, her back to me. She turned, and her eyes were soft, not angry. Isaiah, she said simply, setting the knife down. We stood there in the warm afternoon light, the smell of garlic and tomatoes filling the air, and for the first time in my life I felt seen without having to speak the words myself. The conversation that followed stretched long into the evening, but that first stunned silence when I realized she had chosen love over shock was the beginning of everything changing. I still didn't know if I could survive the rest, but Mom's note had cracked the safe wider than any lock ever could. By the time Dad's truck rumbled into the driveway, Mom and I had talked for over an hour. She told me about her own brother, my Uncle Mark, who had left town when she was 19 and never came back because the family couldn't accept who he loved. "I watched him disappear," she said, voice steady but eyes shining. "I won't let that happen to you." Her honesty stunned me more than the discovery itself. All these years I had pictured her as the quiet supporter of Dad's traditional views, baking cookies for youth group and smiling through Sunday services. Now she was handing me a lifeline I never knew existed. We heard Dad's boots on the porch and both froze. He walked in, kissed Mom on the cheek, and clapped me on the shoulder like always. "Good to see you, son. How's the big city treating you?" I managed to smile and mumbled something about work being busy. The letters were back in the safe, but the knowledge sat between us like an uninvited guest at dinner. Mom served pot roast and asked normal questions about my job at the marketing firm, but every time our eyes met I felt the weight of what we now shared. Dad talked about the Cubs game and the new transmission he installed that afternoon, oblivious. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. Not that night. Later, alone in my old room, I finally texted Ryan. "Something happened at home. Mom found the safe. She knows about us. Call me when you can." His reply came instantly. "Are you okay? I'm here, whatever you need." His support should have eased the knot in my stomach, but it only tightened. Ryan had been pushing gently for months to meet my family, to stop hiding. Now the door was open, and I was terrified to walk through it. I lay on the narrow bed staring at the ceiling fan, remembering the weekend we spent at his parents' lake house last summer. They had welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked. Ryan's mom had even pulled me aside and said, "You make him happy. That's all we care about." I had smiled and nodded, but inside I ached with envy. The next morning Mom made pancakes like nothing had changed, but she slipped me a second note across the table while Dad was in the garage. "Take your time, but don't carry this alone. Ryan deserves to know you're not ashamed." Her words landed like a challenge. I drove back to Chicago that afternoon with the radio off, replaying every conversation. Ryan was waiting at our apartment door when I pulled up, arms crossed, worry etched across his face. The second I stepped inside, he pulled me into a hug that smelled like coffee and the cologne I had bought him for his birthday. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. We sat on the couch for hours while I described the open safe, Mom's note, the uncle I never knew existed. Ryan listened without interrupting, his hand steady on my knee. When I finished, he said quietly, "This could be good, Isaiah. She's on your side." I wanted to believe him, but the fear of Dad's reaction, of losing the only home I had ever known, kept whispering louder. That night we cooked dinner together, simple pasta and salad, and for the first time I let myself imagine a future where I didn't have to edit every story I told. Ryan kissed my temple and murmured, "I love you. We'll figure this out." His words wrapped around me like a blanket, but the blanket felt thin against the coming storm. The week that followed brought small steps. I called Mom every evening, short conversations that felt like testing thin ice. She asked about Ryan's work, about our apartment, about whether we were eating enough. Each question chipped away at the wall I had built. Ryan noticed the change in me, the way I lingered in his arms a little longer, the way I started leaving the bedroom door open when I talked to her. But he also saw the nights I stared at my phone, debating whether to text Dad just to hear his voice. The tension between wanting to be honest and fearing the cost grew heavier with every passing day. Ryan suggested we take a weekend trip up to Door County to clear our heads. The drive along the lake was quiet at first, windows down, the scent of pine and water filling the car. Halfway there, he reached over and turned down the music. "You've been different since you got back from your parents," he said gently. "Not bad different, just quieter. I'm worried about you." I kept my eyes on the road, knuckles white on the wheel. "Mom keeps asking when she can meet you," I admitted. "She wants to come to the city next month." Ryan's smile was immediate and bright, but I felt my chest tighten. Meeting my mom meant the secret was no longer contained. It meant stepping into daylight after years in shadow. We spent the weekend hiking trails and eating fresh fish at roadside stands. On Saturday night, we sat on the dock with our feet in the cold water, stars thick overhead. Ryan told me about his own coming out at 16, how his parents had cried happy tears and taken him to therapy just to make sure he was okay. "It wasn't perfect," he said, "but it was love. You deserve that too." I leaned against his shoulder, the warmth of him steady and real. For a few hours the fear receded and I let myself picture introducing him to Mom over coffee at our favorite cafe. She would like him, I knew it. But Dad's face kept flashing in my mind. The way he had once joked about those people at a family barbecue. The memory soured the moment. Back in Chicago, the texts from Mom grew more frequent. She sent pictures of the garden, asked about Ryan's favorite meals, even suggested recipes. Each message felt like a bridge being built one plank at a time. Ryan started leaving little notes on the fridge, "Proud of you today," or "You're not alone," and I found myself smiling more at work. My coworker Marcus noticed. "You look lighter, man." New relationship. I laughed it off, but the lie tasted bitter now. The old habit of hiding was cracking under the pressure of Mom's quiet acceptance. Then came the phone call that shifted everything. Mom called on a Tuesday evening while Ryan was cooking stir-fry. "Your father found one of the books," she said, voice low. He didn't say anything yet, but I saw him reading the back cover. "Isaiah, he's thinking. Give him time." My stomach dropped. Ryan turned off the stove and came to stand beside me, hand on my back. I hung up and told him what she said. He didn't speak for a long minute. When he did, his voice was careful. "Maybe it's time we stop waiting for permission." The words hung between us. I wanted to agree, but the image of Dad's disappointed face kept me silent. That night we went to bed without the usual easy conversation. The first real crack in our easy rhythm since the safe had been opened. The misunderstanding grew over the next days. Ryan started suggesting small steps, a dinner with just Mom, a casual video call. I pushed back, citing work deadlines and Dad's schedule. He didn't argue, but I saw the hurt in the way he turned away when I changed the subject. One evening he finally said, "I feel like I'm still your secret, Isaiah. Even after your mom knows." The accusation stung because it was true. I had unlocked one door but kept the others bolted. We didn't fight, but the air between us felt heavier, and for the first time I wondered if my fear might cost me the person I loved most. Dad's call came on a Friday afternoon while I was in a meeting. I stepped out into the hallway, heart racing. "Son, we need to talk," he said, voice rough. "Your mother told me what she found. I've been sitting with it for days. I'm not mad, but I'm confused. Come home this weekend. Just us men." The words echoed in my head all the way back to the apartment. Ryan took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. "Whatever happens, I'm with you," he promised. But I could feel the distance growing between us, born from my hesitation. The drive to Illinois felt longer than usual. Dad met me at the door alone. Mom had gone to her sister's for the afternoon, giving us space. We sat in the garage on old folding chairs surrounded by tools and engine parts. He didn't yell. Instead he asked questions: how long, who Ryan was, whether I was happy. His voice cracked when he admitted he had always sensed something but thought it was just me being quiet. "I don't understand it," he said finally. "But I love you. That's not changing." The relief was so sharp it brought tears to my eyes. We hugged awkwardly, the way fathers and sons do when words fail. When I called Ryan that night, the conversation felt lighter. He sounded genuinely happy for me, yet I heard the undercurrent of frustration. "So your dad knows too now," he said. "Does that mean I can finally stop being the invisible boyfriend?" I promised we would plan something soon, but the next morning a text from my old high school friend Jake changed everything. "Dude, your dad just called me asking about Ryan. He said he heard something at the shop. What's going on?" Jake had been the one person I trusted with half-truths back in college. Apparently Dad had reached out to him for answers. The betrayal of my privacy, even well-intentioned, hit like a slap. I drove back to Chicago furious and scared. Ryan tried to calm me, but the argument escalated. "You wanted this?" I snapped without meaning to. "Now everyone knows and I feel exposed." He stepped back, eyes flashing. "I wanted you, Isaiah, not to be the reason your family falls apart." The words cut deep because they echoed my own fears. That night he slept on the couch for the first time. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the safe at home now feeling like it had been easier to keep closed. The misunderstanding had grown into a real rift, and I didn't know how to fix it without losing pieces of myself. The weeks that followed were the hardest. Ryan and I moved through the apartment like polite strangers. He worked late on projects, I buried myself in deadlines. Mom called every few days, sensing the strain, offering quiet advice. "Love isn't supposed to be a secret anymore," she said once. "But it also isn't supposed to cost you everything." Her words circled in my head during long runs along the lakefront. I started questioning everything, whether I had been fair to Ryan, whether my fear had become selfishness. One rainy Thursday Ryan came home early and found me on the balcony, soaked and shivering. He pulled me inside, wrapped me in a towel, and for the first time in weeks we really talked. I told him about the panic that still woke me at night, the voice that whispered I would lose my family if I stepped too far into the light. He listened, then shared his own pain. "I've been waiting for you to choose us out loud," he admitted. "But I can't keep waiting if it's destroying you." The possibility of losing him felt like the ground opening under my feet. That night we held each other without words, but the sacrifice loomed. I began to consider letting him go so he could find someone who wasn't carrying so much fear. The crisis peaked when Dad showed up at our apartment unannounced. He had driven the 2 hours on impulse after Mom told him we were struggling. He sat at our kitchen table, cap in hands, and looked Ryan in the eye for the first time. "I don't have all the answers," Dad said, "but I know my son loves you. That's enough for me to try." The moment was raw and imperfect, but it cracked something open inside me. Ryan's hand found mine under the table. Later, after Dad left, I turned to Ryan and said the words that had been stuck for months. "I want you to meet them properly. No more hiding." The relief in his eyes was worth every sleepless night. Yet the sacrifice still hovered. I had almost walked away to protect the peace I thought I needed. The realization that I had been ready to give up the best part of my life shook me to the core. That weekend we drove to my parents' house together. Mom hugged Ryan like she had known him forever. Dad shook his hand, awkward but sincere. The dinner was full of small talk and long silences, but it was real. On the drive home, Ryan rested his head on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for choosing us." The words settled deep, and for the first time the future felt possible instead of terrifying. Months later the leaves turned gold in Chicago and our lives had settled into a new rhythm. Ryan and I hosted Mom and Dad for Thanksgiving at our apartment. The table was crowded with food and easy laughter. Dad asked Ryan about his latest design project, genuinely interested. Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen and hugged me tight. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "and of the man you chose." The words healed old wounds I hadn't known were still bleeding. Looking back, the open safe had been the beginning of freedom, not the end of safety. I had walked through fire, misunderstandings with Ryan, the fear of losing my family, the internal battle that nearly cost me everything. But on the other side, I found a version of myself I could finally live with. Ryan and I took a weekend trip back to Door County, the same dock where we had sat under the stars. This time I held his hand without looking over my shoulder. We talked about the future. Maybe a house with a yard, maybe adopting a dog, maybe one day telling our own kids that love is worth every risk. The journey had changed all of us. Dad still went to church on Sundays, but he invited Ryan to watch football with him. Mom started reading the books I left behind. And I stopped locking anything away. The man who once hid his truth in a metal box now walked beside the person he loved in full daylight. The growth hadn't been easy or fast, but it had been mine. True or false? Hiding your true self from family is ever justified if it protects your peace?